Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time I'm going to get to just a couple questions that were left on yesterday's video, and probably again this coming Tuesday I will do a longer response video, a thunderous ramble video, where I answer a bunch of questions from the last week or so. But for now, let's kick things off with this comment from XR, who said, "Hey Thor, the reason villains like Thanos but both the Night King work is because there is potentially justification for their actions from their point of view, however misguided or cruel or selfish. To suggest Star Wars needs to show there is no justification for the Sith is to create a one-dimensional antagonist for the franchise we both love. The nuance shown in Andor for the reason why certain groups within the Empire and Rebels have believable reasons for their actions makes for a far more interesting story than good versus evil absolute scenario that I think you're advocating for. I think if you want well-written Star Wars, we need antagonists with believable motivations that the audience can get behind and care about. Imagine D&D further built the motivation of the Night King in Game of Thrones so the audience can understand the reason why he is trying to kill all of Westeros. Others speculate that it's to release his curse that the children of the Force put on them by getting to the God's Eye. Motivation matters in good writing, and Sith need justification." And no offense here, and maybe we have a bit of a misunderstanding, which I'll get to in a bit, but I couldn't disagree more, because the Sith or their actions, or even just their very existence, should never ever be justified. Never. That would defeat the entire purpose of Star Wars, where balance is the absence of those like the Sith, the absence of those who are so selfish and power-hungry that many others will ultimately suffer because of their ambitions. Nor should the audience ever be made to truly get behind and care about the Sith. I think I know what you're trying to say, but I don't want a show or movie that somehow begins to imply Palpatine was in the right with what he did, which is what justified means. It essentially means to prove someone or their actions to be either right and or kind of reasonable, like they make sense that they did that and were right to do it. And I simply do not want anything remotely like that done with Palpatine or any Sith for that matter, or the Sith in general. I don't want a story that makes me, or attempts to make me, start to root for him and or the Empire in story, if you will. Because, sure, as I basically said in my video yesterday, you can certainly like the Sith or an individual Sith for the interesting story element that they are. I am not saying you can't be a fan of Darth Vader, for example, because you fully understand that, yeah, he's a fictional character in a fictional story, and you appreciate just how great or cool of a villain he is. I've got zero problems with that. Hell, I love Darth Vader just as much as pretty much every other Star Wars fan does. But in the context of the story, you should not be rooting for Darth Vader unless you're rooting for him to come back to the light at the end of Return of the Jedi and all of that. But you should not be rooting for him and Palpatine to win, or I guess you can because, yes, once again, you understand it's a fictional story. And if you want to root for the bad guys because you just want to root for the bad guys, you can. So perhaps I should say you should not be given a justified reason to root for him or the bad guys in story, when he or they are meant to represent the very epitome of evil, essentially. That's just not what Star Wars should be about. And to be clear, and again, I think we maybe have a sort of misunderstanding between us. I think I get where you're trying to come from with what you're saying, but justifying is not the same thing as understanding what is motivating someone. Because people can be motivated by all sorts of different things. Sometimes positive things, sometimes very negative things. Though sometimes, yeah, people do things that really don't make any sense whatsoever, that seem to have no motivation at all. And even they don't know why they did them. And sometimes, yeah, there are also those who just kind of want to watch the world burn. And in stories, villains can be motivated by anything from, say, revenge to greed, or maybe it's just pure madness or malevolence that drives them. And sure, sometimes, maybe oftentimes, from their point of view anyway, they feel their actions are completely justified, if not necessary. And that can indeed make a great villain. I'm not arguing against understanding a villain or a Sith in Star Wars, because that does oftentimes lead to a great villain. I'm arguing, especially in Star Wars, against truly justifying them in any way, shape, or form. Or with the story itself saying that they're not all wrong or all bad, that there are maybe even some redeeming qualities to the Sith, when there just should not be. And in a story about the Sith, in a Disney Plus series, for example, which is what I was kind of talking about yesterday, You can absolutely show me how or why they feel that they're right, or how they may even start out with good intentions. But once they become a Sith, once they make that decision and go down the dark path, make it very clear that the dark side consumes and corrupts them entirely, that it twists or destroys any good intent they may have once had, and they become little more than pawns of the dark side, obsessed with power and bringing misery to everyone, essentially. And yes, you could say we have kind of seen that before, right? That is basically the story of Anakin or Darth Vader. Starts with good intent, and things go wrong when he falls to the dark side. But what I'd really like to see, when I said again yesterday I'd like to see a series about the Sith, is for them to go deeper into how they operate and how they, the two of them, how they kind of function with each other. What is life like as a Sith? Show me all the plotting and the scheming that they do, and show me how miserable of an existence it truly is. Show me how they live in a constant state of fear and how that fear is what controls them. What I would love to see is a show that, sure, lets us know that they have motivations or maybe even initial good intent, but let us know and see how awful it is to be a Sith and how awful they are for the galaxy at the same time. Alright, and now on to this question from Joe Garza, who asked, "Hey Thor, normally I find your analysis insightful and well articulated, however this time I am lost. I have no idea what you are saying. I think I understand the overall point that the Jedi can't be held responsible for the Sith. That completely breaks the message of Star Wars. I agree with that. However, I fail to understand your fault with fans getting lost in the details. I don't see the connection there. Please explain. Maybe try being more simplistic and concise." Okay, so basically what I was trying to say in the video yesterday, and no, maybe I wasn't as clear as I could have been. Yesterday's video was one of those times where I started off in one direction and then found myself kind of going in another that I liked better, which happens quite often and is why I tend to script my videos, because it usually kind of keeps me on point. Anyway, basically what I was trying to say in yesterday's video is that, and I'm not saying there's necessarily a right or a wrong way to be a Star Wars fan, you can do you when it comes to Star Wars, but I was saying some fans, they tend to view Star Wars more like a history, where they really love and get into all the little details, almost like a real-world historian would, where what they find, no matter what it is, then becomes, shall we say, an objective truth that is now known to us about history, or in the case of Star Wars, about that galaxy. And right or wrong, they enjoy to look at Star Wars more that way than anything else, as a history again, and to the point where the story itself, or what the story was or is trying to say, or the message or core beliefs of Star Wars, you could even say, they don't matter as much to them. For example, or the example I tried to use in yesterday's video, is I think the line from Ki-Adi-Mundi in The Phantom Menace about the Sith being extinct for a millennium, it is said for the sake of the story George Lucas is trying to tell us. It has great importance if we want to understand what the prequels mean or are trying to say. Because with it, Lucas is trying to let us know the mindset of the Jedi Order at the time. He's trying to tell us why they are so sort of aloof or full of themselves, and it's because there's been no signs of the dark side in 1,000 years. And thus they've sort of let their guard down after all that time. And this all ties into part of the message of the story itself, what it is trying to tell you, the wisdom it is trying to impart upon you, which is that good cannot ever let its guard down, or evil will rise again, no matter how long it may have been gone. If good relaxes, that is the opportunity evil needs to worm its way back in. That is the message of Star Wars. That is the whole point of Palpatine taking over the galaxy. It's not to say that democracy is bad, is it? Of course not. It's to say that if you are not vigilant, if you are going to be complacent with things, a bad guy may rise to power right under your nose, and you may even welcome him in with thunderous applause. That is, in a nutshell, essentially what the story of the prequels is trying to tell us. However, if you're more inclined to, again, kind of look at Star Wars as just a history where things are revealed to us about it from time to time, and I do always love when I see articles or videos that say Star Wars just revealed this or that to us, when in all reality, what actually happened is someone just made something up about Star Wars. And don't get me wrong, I get it. I get why they say it that way or word it that way, and it is to keep the immersion alive, because a lot of people, myself included, we do like to, for fun, think of it or look at it as a real history, and where new things can be uncovered from time to time. But for me personally, I don't want new things uncovered or made up that contradict or change what the story was meant to say, because I don't want the meaning of Star Wars to ever be lost. Because I think there are important things to be learned from the story of Star Wars. There is meaning to what it tries to say. I think there are valuable life lessons in there, which was the original reason why George Lucas made Star Wars in the first place, to give life lessons to those on the verge of adulthood. But anyway here, and maybe I'm not being as concise as I could be, but if you are, say, more inclined to look at Star Wars as a history where we keep uncovering truths about it, then you likely don't care as much about having that line from Ki-Adi-Mundi messed with or recontextualized, because we're finding out the real history now. And that quote-unquote real history of the galaxy far, far away, what really happened back then, is of more interest to you than what that line was supposed to convey for the story, for the message behind it all. And so, to try and finally be concise, sometimes I feel like people get into Star Wars so much that they kind of forget it is just a story that was trying to say something. And yeah, I get why that happens. I get that, as I've said before, that people treat it like a sort of hobby, and they love to learn all the little details and all the little ins and outs. I love to do that too. But Star Wars was made by George Lucas for a reason. There is something of value to be taken away from it if you do just look at it as a story. And though again, I'm all for more stories and learning more about the galaxy, I do enjoy treating it like a history and learning all the little details. But there's a fine line between doing that and then losing what it's all about. Basically, I don't want to see the story George Lucas tried to tell us get lost in the details. And I think more creators should perhaps leave his story alone, stop trying to give new meaning to things, and they should tell their own stories in the Star Wars galaxy. Not saying they can't use the Jedi and the Sith and all that. Stop trying to give new meaning to his stories and look for your own stories to tell in this galaxy that hopefully also have meaning, and that meaning hopefully doesn't contradict the meaning Lucas was trying to give us as well. Well, that's going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about anything and everything I had to say here. Or you can, of course, ask a question for a future lightning response or thunderous ramble video. All you got to do is start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and then ask away. But whatever you choose to do, leave a comment below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.